The first set of questions were asked by Manek. Manek, would you like to ask the questions that you had written to me? If you ask them one by one, I'll answer them one by one.
Namaskaram, Michael.
Namaskaram.
My first question is, everything is Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala shines in the heart as I. But in daily life, it is very difficult to see Aruṇācala Bhagavan in all the people around us. True, we can see Bhagavan in the innocent animals, be they strays, be they pets. We can see Aruṇācala in the sick, we can see them in the needy too. But the challenge is when you come into close contact with people you don't want to be around, or with people you cannot tolerate for their ways. We may have utmost love for Bhagavan Aruṇācala, but this is the test where we fail when it comes to seeing him in all unconditionally. So my question is, how do we see Aruṇācala, that is Bhagavan, in all unconditionally?
Okay, the simple answer is we cannot see Bhagavan in all until we see Bhagavan in ourselves. Until we know us, when we know ourselves as we actually are, we won't see any others. Or we can say it another way, whatever others, what appeared as others before, we will find to be nothing but our own self. We see the example of Bhagavan. Bhagavan had equal love to all. There were all sorts of people around Bhagavan, and also all sorts of animals. Bhagavan had, whether it was people in human form or in animal form, Bhagavan had equal love to all. Why? Because he didn't see anyone as other than himself. Because he experienced all as himself, he loved all as himself. So when Bhagavan loves us, he doesn't love us as the person that we take ourselves to be. He loves us as himself, because he sees us as nothing other than himself. So in order to love all as ourselves, we need to see all as ourselves. And in order to see all as ourselves, we need to see what we actually are. So long as we limit ourselves by mistaking ourselves to be, I am this body, then there are other people, other animals, and some of them seem to have good qualities, some have bad qualities, some we like, some we dislike. So our love for others is colored by our likes and dislikes. Some other people or creatures we can't stand. Some we are very attached to. So all these likes and dislikes come because of our having limited ourselves as I am this body. Bhagavan, as an example of how Bhagavan is equal to all, he had equal love even to those hornets whose nest he accidentally disturbed, and who he allowed to sting his thigh. Such was his love, but he was ready to bear that pain because he was aware that, though unintentionally, he had disturbed their nest. So that is the state of truly loving all as oneself. We are far short of that. Why? Because we see ourselves as a person. And because we see ourselves as a person, we see other people, and other people we see qualities we like and qualities we dislike. If they have qualities we like, we say we like these people. If they have qualities we dislike them. But all these likes and dislikes arise only when we limit ourselves as a body. In sleep, we are free of all likes and dislikes and perfectly happy because we are aware of ourselves just as I am. But in waking and dream, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. So long as this false awareness I am this body is there, this false awareness I am this body, as Bhagavan said, that is what is called ego. So long as we experience ourselves as ego, as this false awareness I am this body, we inevitably have likes and dislikes. And so we cannot love all as ourselves. So the only way to love all as ourselves is to get rid of ego and thereby see all as ourselves. Does that adequately answer that question?
Yeah, it is a process, right? I mean, it's an ongoing journey.
It is a process. The process can be brought to an end here and now if we are willing to let go. But the thing is, we are not yet willing to let go. We still have our desires and attachments. So slowly, slowly, by the practice of self-investigation and self-surrender, we have to slowly, slowly give up our likes and dislikes, our desires and attachments, to the extent that our likes and dislikes, desires and attachments and so on, to the extent that these are weakened, to that extent, ego becomes humble and submissive. And the more ego subsides, the more the less it is affected by whatever is going on outside. So if we've got strong likes and dislikes, that shows the strength of our own ego. The strength of ego means the strength of our Vishaya Vasana, the strength of our likes and dislikes. So we, in order to give up this ego, we need to give up all the likes, dislikes, desires, and attachment to the fuel that sustain ego. So we will not be willing to surrender ourselves until we have to a considerable extent weakened our Vishaya Vasanas, which are the seeds of all our likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments.
Oh.
So as you say, it's a process because we are not yet willing to give up, to surrender ourselves completely. We have to persevere in this practice of self-investigation and self-surrender, and thereby gradually give up our hold on all these desires and attachments.
My second question was, when we are doing self-inquiry, it is a form of Advaita practice because we are looking at the self. However, when we are praying to Aruṇācala, isn't it a kind of a Dvaita? It's bringing in dualism in the process?
Yes. So long as we see, Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. So long as we take ourselves to be this body, we cannot say, what is taking itself to be I am this body, that is ego. This ego, as ego, we are something, we seem to be something other than God. Because as ego, we're limited in so many ways. Whereas God, we consider to be infinite, without any limits. So we seem to be something separate from God. So the only way to give up the separation, the sense of separation, and the only way to give up duality is to give up ego. Ego is the root of all duality, of all separation. So the most effective means to give up ego, or ultimately the only direct means to give up ego, is to turn our attention within. However, because of the strength of our desires and attachments, our mind keeps on going outwards. So when we are constantly trying to turn our attention within, but failing because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas, sometimes it's natural for us to call out for help. And so we pray to Bhagavan, we pray to Aruṇācala for help. Bhagavan and Aruṇācala, though they seem to be outside us, Aruṇācala seems to be the form of a hill, Bhagavan seems to be the form of a gentle old man with a smiling face. What Bhagavan said is, I exist in you as I. That is, he is not the form that he seems to be. What he says about himself is equally true about Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala is not the form that it seems to be. So long as we are a body, it's true that hill is Aruṇācala, that hill is God. But the ultimate truth is Aruṇācala and Bhagavan are that which is shining in our heart as I. Not as I am this, but the I am in the I am this. In other words, the pure I, I, bereft of adjuncts, a pure awareness, whatever else we may be aware of, we are always aware of ourselves as I am. Now we're aware of ourselves as I am Manik, or I am Michael. But even when we're aware of ourselves as I am Manik, or I am Michael, we're still aware of ourselves as I am. That is, I am is the heart of ego. It's the core of ego. So that is the reality. So all we need to do is to give up the adjuncts, and what remains is that pure awareness I am. So during this, as you say, it's a process. Because of our desires and attachments, we're undergoing a process. And prayer has a role to play in this process, as Bhagavan very clearly taught by example through Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. There are so many prayers in Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam, particularly in Aruṇācala Akṣaramaṇamālai. So why did Bhagavan pray to Aruṇācala? Of course, Bhagavan doesn't need to pray for anything, but Bhagavan has no doership or no nothing of his own. So Aruṇācala used the body, the mind and body of Bhagavan to pray in order to teach us how to pray. So prayer has a role to play in this path. Does that answer that part of your question?
Yes. In fact, this kind of what you said is prayer has a role in this entire process. Even Bhagavan, I'll just read out one small line here. When Bhagavan moved from Skandashram to his mother's tomb at the foot of the hill, he said, "It was not on my own volition that I moved from Skandashram. Something brought me here and I obeyed. It was not my decision, but the divine will." Here, Bhagavan is talking like an ordinary individual. It's like a humble declaration of him being an ordinary mortal and, acknowledging the superiority of the divine. So I want to ask here, does a Jnani also tend to move in and out of the truth of the self, and self being the only reality?
No. Jnani never moves in or out. As Bhagavan says it very explicitly in the 14th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, and of Who Am I, where he's talking about the paragraph he's talking about happiness. He says the nature of the mind he compares the mind to a person who's wandering, who's sometimes unable to bear the heat of the sun, returns to the cool shade of the tree, and then again being restless wanders out into the sun until the person can't bear the heat of the sun and again returns. Bhagavan says such is the nature of the mind of the Ajnani. It's constantly going out and coming back in again, whereas the mind of the Jnani never leaves the shade of the tree. Of course, the Jnani doesn't have a mind, but it's a way of expressing it.
So then why did Bhagavan say something that I did not move of my own volition and something brought me here and I just obeyed? It was not my decision, but the divine will.
Okay.
Why did he say that?
What is it that moved from Skandashram down to the foot of the hill?
Sorry?
What is it that moved from Skandashram down to the foot of the hill? It is the body that we take to be Bhagavan. So when he said, I did not move of my own volition, in that context, I is referring to the body. But he doesn't take himself to be that body, but we take him to be that body. So rather than saying this body, because if he could have, in one place, when he wrote the note, when he was leaving Madurai, he started by saying, I am going in search of my father. And then he said, this is undertaking a good thing. He refers to himself as this. And at the end of a note, he doesn't even give himself a name. He just drew a line. So Bhagavan doesn't identify himself with the body. So he could refer to it as this body did not come down from Skandashram of its own accord. this body did according to the divine will. But that's an unnatural way of saying it. Bhagavan is very, very simple. So because we see him as a body, when talking to us at our level, he refers to that body in such context as I. But that doesn't mean that he actually saw himself as that body. So we have to understand the level at which Bhagavan is talking. Bhagavan's actual experience is I alone am. He was aware of himself as nothing other than pure awareness, which alone is what exists. Nothing else exists at all. That's his actual experience. But we see him as a person. So he often talks as if he is that person. And as that person, he's perfectly humble. Bhagavan is the very embodiment of humility. And Bhagavan said, I think in one place in Guru Vachakakavai, why God is worthy to be worshipped by all the creatures in the world, because of his humility, because he sees himself as lower than the lowest. He is therefore the highest of the highest. So Bhagavan is God. And as God, he saw himself as the lowest of the lowest. And that is why he is the highest of the highest. Bhagavan lived a very simple life, as I say, he was the very embodiment of humility in all that he did. So there's no contradiction. It's the confusion arises because we take Bhagavan to be that body. So as that body, he says, I came down from a foot of the hill. It wasn't my will, it was the divine will. Because there's no ego in that body to have a will of its own. So whatever that body did is the divine will. Not only coming down from Skandashram to the foot of the hill. Every answer he gave to a question, when he cutting the vegetables, every action of his, down to the smallest action, all is the divine will. Everything is going on according to the divine will. And he tells us, more importantly, everything in our life is also going on according to a divine will. So when he says in the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? That is because we identify ourselves with this body, and therefore we think, I need to pay the bills, therefore I need to go to office and to work and to do this. We take on doership for all these actions. Whatever work this body and mind are destined to do, they will be made to do, as Bhagavan said. But because we exist in this body as, or we seem to exist in this body as an ego, and as an ego we have likes and dislikes, we are constantly trying to experience what we are not destined to experience, and to avoid experience what we are destined to experience. Bhagavan says, what is to happen will happen no matter how much, what is not to happen will not happen, no matter how much effort you make to make it happen. What is to happen will not stop, however much you try to obstruct it. So as ego, with our likes and dislikes and so on, our will, we are free to like or dislike things, and to try to achieve what we like and try to avoid what we dislike. But though we are free to want to avoid unpleasant things and to experience pleasant things, and though we are free to try to do so, we cannot experience anything that we are not destined to experience. And we cannot avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience, so long as we allow our mind to go outwards. So how to escape from this? Bhagavan says, the only freedom you have to escape from all this is to turn your mind within and know what you actually are. So long as we allow our mind to go outwards, we cannot avoid experiencing whatever prarabdha is allotted to us. That is Prarabdha is the fruit of our past karmas. So it is whatever we are to experience in this lifetime, that is prarabdha. And in order for us to experience that, certain actions of body, speech, and mind are necessary. So God will make our body do whatever is necessary according to prarabdha, as he said in the first sentence of the note to his mother. That doesn't mean all the actions of his body, speech, and mind driven by him, because he is driving those actions that are necessary for prarabdha. And by our free will, we are trying to do so many other things also. But whatever we try to do by our free will not fructify. So everything is happening according to the divine will. All we need to do is to surrender our will and accept whatever is happening. When we surrender our will, well, we cannot surrender our will. We can reduce the strength of our likes and dislikes, desires and attachments to a considerable extent, but we cannot give them up entirely without giving up their root. Their root of all likes, dislikes and so on is ego. To whom are these desires and attachments, these likes and dislikes? To me. That me is this, myself as this person, as this ego that I seem to be. Everything is happening according to the divine will. All we need to do is surrender to it. Does that adequately answer that question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Bala Nagaraju, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala. Hello.
Hello,
Mr.
yeah.
Michael Guruji. Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala. This is Bala from India.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I have some questions, but I would like to give the chance to remaining people also. That's why shall I ask you all at once, or one question at now, and remaining questions in the end of the session? Is it okay, sir?
Okay, fine.
Because I would like to give remaining people also give the chance, because if I ask multiple questions, they won't get the chance, right? That's why I want to give justice to all of them.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Fine, yes.
First question is actually one incident happened in the Ramanashramam. One devotee is coming to Ramanashramam when Bhagavan was there, and he was coming via road, through the road, and there one person scolding Bhagavan. Very rashly scolding Bhagavan. He heard that words of that person who is scolding Bhagavan, and he got angry on the person. Why he is calling Bhagavan? Bhagavan is a god to us. Why he is calling again that Bhagavan? Okay, he forcefully stopped his angry and came to Ramanashramam and pranam to Bhagavan, and he said to Bhagavan that Bhagavan, one person is calling you very rashfully. I got angry. I would like to beat him in like anything, but I stopped my angry. I forcefully stopped my angry. He said to that Bhagavan the same word. Bhagavan said, "Oh, you did a great job. Bhagavan is not a body. Bhagavan is self." He said that one. Then we get that. Then we can say those words heartfully. We have to say this is not body. This is not body. This is not mine also. Then when we can say that word, as like Bhagavan said.
That is when. So long as we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as this body. We can tell ourselves, I am not this body. And by reminding ourselves that we are not this body, we can thereby keep...
Mr. Michael, Guruji, actually, I am from India. I can't understand your accent. Can you please explain it slowly?
I'll try and that is, so long as we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as I am this body. So we cannot get rid of this false awareness, I am this body, without eradicating ego. And we can't eradicate ego without ātma-vichara, without self-knowledge, without being aware of ourselves as we actually are. So that is the only way to get rid of this false awareness, I am this body. However, during the course of our practice, it is good to remind ourselves that this body is not what we actually are. We can begin to detach ourselves, at least to some extent, from this body by reminding ourselves, I am not this, I am that which is shining in my heart as I. But to actually get rid of the false awareness, I am this body, simply by telling ourselves, I am not this body, I am that pure I am, we're not going to get rid of it. We need to turn our attention within, to face ourselves and to see what we actually are. That is what the Bhagavan said. It's only by vichara that we can get rid of this false identification, I am this body.
Even we did self investigation like this. This is not my body, and also it's not believing myself. See, sir, if you say self investigation, the second question I will ask in that one. Up to now, even we feel this is not my body. My heart is not accepting that one. If we say this is not body, this is not mine. Even if you say you investigate, self vichara, we like do this. I'm not satisfying with that. Then what to do? Then how to I believe that this is not my body, this is not mine?
Well, firstly, the reason why we, in order to investigate ourselves, we first need to understand what we are not. Because so long as we identify ourselves with body and mind, if we're told to investigate ourselves, we'll begin investigating body and mind. So we first need to understand what we are not in order to understand what we have to attend to. What we actually are is only this fundamental awareness, I am. Because only we are aware I am in all three states. In waking, we're aware I am. In dream, we're aware I am. In sleep, we're aware I am. In waking and dream, we're aware of I am mixed with adjuncts. And consequently, we're aware of other phenomena. In sleep, we're aware of just I am. That is pure, I am in its pristine state, in its pure state. So, so what Bhagavan has asked us to do is to turn our attention within, to try to attend to ourselves just as I am. We, because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas, that is, our Vishaya Vasanas means our inclination to attend to things or to experience things other than ourselves. In other words, the inclination to experience Vishayas, our attention keeps on coming outwards. Whenever we try to turn it within, it pops out again. So it requires patient and persistent practice. At first it may seem, but this is not something very interesting. But if we think deeply about it, by allowing our attention to go outside, whatever we are knowing is just an illusory appearance. And all this is, whatever knowledge we acquire in this life, when this body goes, we lose all this knowledge. So knowing anything other than ourselves is at best, it's of only temporary benefit, transitory benefit, whereas knowing ourselves is the eternal benefit. So we need to use our viveka, that's our discrimination, and we need to be constantly reminding ourselves that the only thing that is truly worth knowing is knowing who am I. So we need to casual out.
But
yes.
Yeah, but Bhagavan said the Jnani has no mind, right? But Bhagavan said Jnani has no mind.
Jnani
then you come to the state, that state that we had no mind.
Yes.
No mind. Then when we come to that state, no mind state.
But Bhagavan has analyzed the mind. The mind is actually, there are two elements of the mind. There is all the thoughts and feelings and everything. They are all objects seen by us. There is also the first thought, the thought called I, in other words, ego. That is the subjective aspect of the mind. So long this ego is the root of the mind, that all the other thoughts occur to whom? Only to me, that is to this ego. So without ego, there are no other thoughts. So in order to destroy the mind, we need to destroy ego. What is ego? Ego is the false awareness, I am this body. So long as that is, in other words, the ego is nothing but I am mixed and confused and conflated with adjuncts. So long as we mistake ourselves to be this set of adjuncts called these 5 sheaves, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. When we turn our attention within, the more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more we will thereby separate ourselves from these 5 sheaves. And eventually, if we turn our attention within, so to speak, if we turn back 180 degrees, we will see ourselves alone. In other words, we'll be aware of ourselves alone. When we're aware of ourselves alone, we are thereby aware of ourselves as we actually are. When we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, this ego, the false awareness, I am this body, is thereby destroyed. So when ego is destroyed, all other thoughts are also destroyed along with it. That's why Bhagavan said, the Jnani has no mind. In order to experience that, we need to do as Bhagavan taught us, turn our mind within more and more. In Akṣaramaṇamālai, Bhagavan has summarized it all very, very beautifully as what Aruṇācala taught Bhagavan. Aruṇācala obviously didn't teach Bhagavan in words, Aruṇācala taught Bhagavan in silence, but Bhagavan interpreted the silent teaching of Aruṇācala to us in words. He said, Tirumbi ahandane dinamaha kankan teriyamendraneya Aruṇācala. That means turning within, daily see yourself with the inner eye. It will be known. Thus did you say, Aruṇācala. So this is what Aruṇācala taught Bhagavan. This is what Bhagavan taught us. So this is all we need to do. That is, when he said daily, dinam, that means constantly or repeatedly. So we need to persistently turn our attention back within to try to see ourselves with our inner eye. What is the inner eye? It's the eye of attention. That is by turning our attention, which is now facing outwards, we need to turn it back within to face ourselves alone. So this is the sum and substance of Bhagavan's teachings. This is what we need to put into practice.
Well, one more question, second question, Mr. Michael Guruji. Actually, in the Who Am I investigation, how to find the thief of the ego? The thief means I. We have to find the I, na? How who is trying to find the I and who is I? Then there's duality is coming, right, sir? Duality is coming, but there's no duality. Only single one self is there. But when we do self-investigation like who am I, and that means one person is trying to find the I, and I is separate one, who is the searcher is separate one, and doer is separate one. Then we can find duality here. Then how to remove the duality? Then only single self is there, right?
There is no duality, because the I that is seeking,
yes, I know.
Yes,
but
a one. How many eyes do you have? There's only one eye. So but
who is sitting for I and who is?
Now we have risen as ego. We are now aware of ourselves as I am this body. Because we are aware of ourselves as I am this body, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves in order to see what we actually are. So what is attending and what is attended to is one and the same thing. That is why it's called self-attention, self-investigation. There are no two things involved in self-investigation. There's only one I, and that one I is attending to itself. When we attend to anything other than ourselves, that is duality. When we attend to ourselves alone, that is non-duality.
Yeah, got it. Okay, good.
That is, I can never be an object.
Actually, how to? Okay, fine. And how to identify ego and self? How to if the ego comes into my mind, or if the ego comes to me, and then how to identify ego and how to identify the self?
Okay, this can be explained with a very simple analogy. Supposing you're walking with Bhagavan along a dark path in the night, and you see what seems to be a snake lying on the path. So you're afraid and you don't want to go any further because you think a snake's there. Bhagavan tells you it is not a snake, it is just a rope. but you're still afraid because it looks like a snake. So how do you actually see that it is a snake? Is that it is a rope, sorry. You have to look at the snake very carefully. If you look at the snake carefully enough, you'll see, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. Likewise, just like the snake and the rope are not two different things, there's only one thing there, it's a rope, but it seems to be a snake. Likewise, there are not two eyes, a real eye and a false eye, a self eye and a ego eye. There's only one eye. Now that one eye, we mistake to be ego because we mix that eye is now, we experience it mixed with adjuncts. And as an adjunct mixed eye, it is ego. But if we look at this ego very carefully, that means look at the I element of the ego, not at the body element, at the I element of the ego, the essential core of the ego. If we look at it carefully enough, we'll see, oh, it's not an ego, it is just pure awareness. That is our real nature. So there are not two eyes, ego and self. There is only one eye. If we look at that one eye carefully enough, we will see what it actually is.
Actually, one more question. Actually, everywhere in the entire universe, everywhere is self only. In the entire body, everywhere is self only, entire universe. But we have to search for the self. Already is there in the entire universe.
Sorry, I didn't.
The entire universe, everywhere is self only.
Self means.
In the entire universe is self only.
Okay, self means.
Self only, because
self is not a thing. Self is you.
Yes.
You. What you call self is you. So long as you identify yourself as a body, you see all this multiplicity. So you are not aware of yourself as you actually are, because what you actually are is just pure awareness. So long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are experiencing multiplicity, duality, and so on. We need to turn our attention back towards ourselves. When we see ourselves as we actually are, we will see that we alone exist. Nothing else exists.
Yeah, okay. Actually, self was covered by
previously appeared as multiplicity is actually nothing but ourself. Because what actually exists, what appears as a snake is only a rope. Just like that, what appears as all this multiplicity is only the one I, ourself.
Actually, self was covered with Maya, means nothing but illusion. Self was because Vishaya Vasanas, you said just now, na? Just now you said Vishaya Vasanas. Those are covered. Those are covered the self. That's why how to remove those Vishaya Vasanas or Mayas? How to remove? That is,
self is never actually, our real nature is never actually covered. The whole, what is called Maya is nothing but ego. So as ego, we're always looking away from ourselves. So long as we're looking away from ourselves, what we actually are seems to be hidden. What is the solution? Instead of looking at other things, look at yourself. Then you will see there is no Maya. You are never covered.
Okay.
So that all the Bhagavan's teachings are very, very, they couldn't be more simple. One thing Bhagavan asks us to do, look at yourself, see what you actually are. When you look at yourself and see what you actually are, then you will find you alone exist.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Guruji.
Okay.
Right.
Apurva, I will answer your question a little. Sorry, I think I got muted. Sorry, what I said is, Apurva, I will answer your question afterwards. Now I will answer one more question that I received by email, and then maybe it'll be time for our break. And then after the break, I'll answer your question, Apurva, because you're the first one who has your hand raised. The next question is from Jim Hunt. What he says is, all the information is available on YouTube, books, etc. So why do so many Advaita teachers, advisors, keep repeating over and over the same thing in different words? Muji, Gangaji, Tole, and so on. If the aim is to abide in the self, it seems odd that they seem to try anything to keep their followers following. Their actions might encourage others to seek followers. Well, I cannot speak for Muji, Gangaji, or Tole. If you want to ask them, if you want to know why they're doing what they're doing, you have to ask them. I think, as has always been the case, in the past and in the present, and it always will be the case, there are people who make a business of spirituality. They set themselves up as so-called gurus, and they teach, and it becomes a business for them. And it's not only can be quite a lucrative business in financial terms, it's also a boost for the ego. So I don't say, I'm not pointing at anyone, but I'm saying there are people out there for whom this is just a business. So they're doing it for their business purposes. I can only speak for myself. Because friends asked me for clarification on Bhagavan's teachings, and because I had the good fortune to be with Sadhu Om for some time and to have spent most of my life thinking about Bhagavan's teachings and trying my best to put them into practice, I seem to be able to answer most of the questions that people ask me, but maybe not always entirely satisfactorily, but people keep on coming back and asking me more questions. So it's not, of course, I'm not saying anything of my own. I'm just saying, well, or possibly sometimes rewording, but I'm saying what Bhagavan said, because I don't know anything else. Whatever I know is what I've learned from Bhagavan. So I'm just sharing what I learned from Bhagavan. Because people ask questions from many different angles, I freely admit, but what I say, if you see they're now on YouTube, there are several hundred videos of mine. And if you if you see my blog, there are hundreds of articles there. Basically, I'm saying the same thing again and again. And as I said earlier, Bhagavan's teachings are extremely simple. That the essence of Bhagavan's teachings is that we need to turn our attention within, that is back towards ourselves, to see what we actually are. That is Bhagavan's teachings in a nutshell. So Bhagavan's teachings couldn't be more simple, but because of their very simplicity, people have difficulty grasping them. That is, it's not that Bhagavan's teachings are difficult to understand. They're extremely easy to understand, but most of us are unwilling to accept the simplicity of Bhagavan's teachings. That is, Bhagavan's teachings are very radical. He says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Therefore, ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. So this is very radical teachings. People find it difficult it's not difficult to understand, but difficult to accept. So because people have difficulty accepting it, their minds complicate what is actually very, very simple. So they keep on coming back with questions. So in my experience, though that is why I'm able to answer all these questions, because all I'm doing actually is I'm just reminding people of what Bhagavan has said. Bhagavan has said very, very clearly in works such as, well, in his own original writings, in Who Am I?, in Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, Padeshundya, Aruṇācala Padigam, in so many places, Bhagavan has expressed this so clearly and so simply. So by relating whatever question I'm asked back to Bhagavan's teachings, that Bhagavan's own original, what he himself has written, I'm able to provide an answer for, well, it's not me who's providing, I'm just pointing out the answers have already been given by Bhagavan. So that is why, as I say, I can speak only for myself. That is why I go on saying the same thing again and again. And I will continue doing so long as people ask me questions. If people stop asking me questions, then I'll keep quiet. But so long as people ask me questions, because of my love for this subject, I'm very happy to answer whatever questions I may be asked. But I freely admit, whatever questions anyone asks me, I'm going to continue giving the same answer again and again, maybe in slightly different words, but it will be the same answers, because as I say, Bhagavan's teachings are so simple. There is no need for complicating it. We just need to keep it as simple as possible, as close to what Bhagavan actually said as possible. So I hope that answers your question, Jim. Apurva, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask your question?
So I have two questions which I think are related to each other. I shall start with something that I read in your book yesterday evening. In the chapter, The Nature of the Mind, somewhere around perhaps this, a little, maybe about 10 or 12 pages into the chapter, you say that the basic and essential form of our mind is only this root thought I, our deeply rooted imagination that we are a material body. So why and how does this imagination arise? It arises only due to our imaginary self-ignorance. Because we first imagine that we do not know what we really are, we are then able to imagine that we are something that we are not. And I had some reflection on this, as well as something else you've said in the chapter, and I was sharing this with Sanjay, and he mentioned that this particular paragraph, or this is something that you see differently now, and you wish that if you could revise your book, you would express something differently. So could you say why? Because for me, what you said seemed to ring true. And the reason why it seemed true to me is that it may seem like I'm digressing a little, but just bear with me. What I feel is that, see, we're all individuals who are born, yeah? And let me not get into what happens. All sorts of stuff happens to us along the way as we are growing up, as babies, as infants, toddlers, children, teenagers, young adults, our working life and whatnot. Now, for me at least, speaking for myself, somewhere there is this sense of one carries this question: what is life? Who am I? Where did this world come from? Why? And one just carries all sorts of questions, and it seems as though everything is fundamentally a mystery, but one can't seem to crack it, and one just goes on living life. You earn a livelihood, and you try to obtain pleasure and get security and whatnot. Now, at some point, some people seem to wake up. It's as if they are really shaken badly by life, and they wake up. And usually, I think for most people, it would be suffering of some sort. And they happen to encounter something, it doesn't necessarily have to be Bhagavan's teachings, it could be something else as well. And it seems to put them on a certain path. They start looking inwards. Now, whatever they've heard, either from a person or something that they've read in a book, they've not actually experienced it, but yet it seems to ring true for them. They hear something, or they read something and they think, this is true. And I need to crack this mystery. I need to find out the truth. Now, the thing is, what is it within them that tells them that what they've heard is true? It can only be truth which is already existing within them, that recognizes the truth they have read or heard. So, which does not mean that we are self-realized or we've attained moksha and so on, but it's as if a piece of the truth, some form of the truth is already there in us, and it is spurring us to seek itself. Now, does this not mean that yes, ignorance in a sense is also an illusion? Yeah, I was just curious why you felt differently about it, and why you, I mean, anything that you have to say on this.
Yeah.
What really is the root illusion? Is illusion itself the root illusion, or is the identification with the body the root illusion?
Okay, I will answer that. That is the difference between what I say now and what I said then. In substance, it is essentially, it's all the same. But I think now I express things in a more refined and a more precise way. I wouldn't now write as I wrote in that book. It's not that it's wrong, but it's slightly, it's not saying things in the clearest possible way, because essentially, I mean, sometimes, for example, Maya is distinguished, the two forces of Maya are distinguished, Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Avarana Shakti means the clouding, the covering, the veiling, whereas Vikshepa means the dispersion. Without, as Bhagavan often used to say, without a background darkness, you can't project pictures on the screen. So the background darkness has to be there in order to project pictures on the screen. But in the case of Maya, actually these two are simultaneous. Though it is sometimes said that in sleep, though there's no Vikshepa Shakti, but Avarana Shakti is remaining, that is only a certain way of analyzing things, but it's not exactly the way Bhagavan analyzed things. So to say that the false awareness or the imagination that we are a body is caused by self-ignorance, we couldn't mistake ourselves to be a body, what we are not, in other words, a body, if we were not self-ignorant. So the self-ignorance is the background darkness, and the I am a body is the projection. We can say it that way, but actually in practice, these two things are inseparable. It's not that one is the cause of the other, but actually they're the same thing. That is, both of the nature of ego. The very nature of ego is to be ignorant of itself. Why is it ignorant of itself? Because it mistakes itself to be something other than what it actually is. That is, as ego, we're always aware I am, but we're not aware just I am, we're aware I am this body. So this I am, this false awareness I am this body is itself self-ignorance. There's no self-ignorance independent of that. So that's why it's I think the way I expressed it, though there's nothing wrong in what I said, I think it is not the simplest possible way of saying it. I think it makes it appear that self-ignorance and the false identification I am this body are two separate things. They are actually one and the same.
Okay.
Both are the nature of ego.
So the second question, when I encounter the teachings, I know that they are true. Yeah, I mean, I can intuitively sense that they are true. So what really is going on here? You know, is it me just, am I really just fooling myself? Is it actually my intellect, my experience and speculation, which is all coming together? And then I tell myself, oh, this is intuition. I know something deep within is talking to myself. Or is it that in some way, truth is already active and operating within us, and that is why, you know, because for me it did happen like that. I had so many questions as a teenager, and practically nothing that I read or heard seemed to satisfy me. And then you suddenly encounter something, and that satisfies you. No, why does that happen? You know, I mean,
Okay, I can answer this. That is, our real nature is the clear light of pure awareness. So perfect clarity is our real nature. However, because of our rising as ego, and as ego we have so many vasanas, and the vasanas project as thoughts, to the extent that our mind is, that the vasanas in our mind are strong. But vasanas in this context, I'm talking about Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasana means the inclination to go outwards. So long as these are strong, our mind is, or to the extent that these are strong, our mind is thereby clouded with lots of thoughts, desires, and so on. So long as our mind is clouded, we are not able to see what is true. So if, for example, we go out into the street and we start telling people about Bhagavan's teachings, most people will think most of them won't have any interest at all. And even those who are ready to give us a patient hearing, they would think, oh no, that's all nonsense. There are so many other problems in life. I've got to pay my mortgage. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got so many responsibilities. That is, their mind are filled with so many preoccupations that they're not able to recognize the truth when it's expressed. During the course of our spiritual development, that is, all of us, from the greatest sinner to the greatest saint, we're all undergoing a process of spiritual development. We just happen to be at different stages along the journey, along the path. So as we proceed along the path, our mind gets purified. That is particularly by bhakti and such practices. Slowly, we feel inclined to surrender ourselves to God. We give up our likes and dislikes. We accept whatever happens, both the good things and the bad things, all are His will. Slowly in this way, our mind gets purified. And to the extent the mind is purified, the natural clarity in our heart shines forth. So when our mind reaches a certain level of purification, we are able to recognize, oh yes, this is the path. So it's at that stage that Guru appears in our life. Guru is nothing but our own self appearing outwardly in human form. So it's our own self. It's our real nature that has appeared outside as Bhagavan. And Bhagavan says, what you are seeking is not outside you, it's in you. You are that. In order to know what is real, you need to know what you yourself are. So turn within and investigate yourself. When Bhagavan says that to us, because we've reached a certain, we've traveled along this road for a certain point, up to a certain point, we have sufficient clarity of mind to recognize, oh, this is it. So I mean, we shouldn't feel proud of this. Oh, I've got a very pure mind, so I'm able to recognize Bhagavan teaching. We shouldn't take it in that way. But in all humility, the fact is, but by his grace, we have, through so many lives, or through so much dissatisfaction with worldly pleasures and all these things, we have now reached a certain point. And we've reached a point where we're able to recognize the truth of what Bhagavan says. This is entirely by his grace. Bhagavan often used to say, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. That is, it is grace that starts us on this path. It is grace that reveals everything and gives all the help required as we're traveling along this path. And finally, it is grace that will swallow us. So it's all entirely by grace. But part of the process of the work, part of the process of grace's working, grace isn't something outside. Grace is nothing but the love that we, as we actually are, have for ourselves as we actually are. So that love is always shining in our heart. And that love is nothing other than the clarity I was talking about, because the love is the true nature, is the actual nature of pure awareness, which is what we actually are. So the more that is, grace is bringing about this purification of our mind, and the more the purification is brought about, the more clearly the light of grace is shining in our heart. So none of this is our doing; it's entirely his doing. That is why Bhagavan repeatedly said, all we need to do is just yield ourselves to that. Yield ourselves to that light of love and clarity, but it's ever shining in our heart. The more we yield ourselves to that, more ego subsides, and the more the light and love shines forth. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Was there anything else you wanted to ask, or?
No, that's it. I will go back to your book though, and do some more reading up to see if anything else comes up.
I would also, I mean, the reason, though, if I were to write, I don't have time to write a book now, but if I were to write such a book again, I wouldn't write exactly as I wrote then. However, that book represents a certain level of my own journey, a certain level of my own development. And I still get feedback from many people who greatly appreciate the book. So it's take it as a stage along the journey. But I would say, as I think Sanjay said to you, I personally feel that in my more recent articles on my blog, I'm expressing things in a better way. Of course, this is not my doing. This is all Bhagavan's doing. But I feel over the course of time, firstly, my own clarity of understanding, my own understanding has been constantly being simplified and clarified. And also the ability to express it, because I'm always answering people's questions. I'm constantly refining my way of expressing it. What I'm expressing is only Bhagavan's teachings, but I feel that Bhagavan is enabling me to express it more simply and more clearly now than I did in the past. So it's certainly, I don't say it's not worth reading the book. It's certainly worth reading it. As I say, many people still tell me they find it very useful. But in addition to that, I also suggest you read some of my more recent articles, and then you'll see what Sanjay means when he says that my way of expressing things is now more refined, and is not, I don't express things exactly as I express them in the book. That is not to say that the substance of the book is wrong. It's just, possibly you can say it's clumsily expressed.
Yeah, okay. I will keep that in mind.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
I will now answer the next question I've been asked by email. Kumar Dayaharan has written, I don't know if you're here, Kumar, but it's a simple question, so I'll read it. When I close my eyes and meditate, whatever is in my mind is distracting me and is not allowing me to do a deep meditation. Even figures of God come into my mind. Ramana's teachings say to keep the mind free from anything other than self-enquiry. How do I overcome this problem? This problem is a problem that any spiritual aspirant has. That is why thoughts and or images of God or whatever, why all these things keep on drawing our mind away from ourselves. This is because, Bhagavan said, this is all because of our Vishaya Vasanas. Vishaya Vasanas, Vishaya means phenomena. So anything that we perceive is a Vishaya. Vasana means inclination. So because of our inclination to be aware of phenomena, to experience phenomena, we keep on trying to go outwards. So what Bhagavan has asked us to do is not to attend to anything other than ourselves. Whenever our attention goes away from ourselves towards any other thing, that is, whenever any thought arises, he asks us, to whom does it arise? To turn our attention back within. It's not, we don't actually have to ask the question, to whom does this arise? Though sometimes that may be helpful. But the point is not a matter of asking the question. That is not the key to it. We need to, whenever any thought arises, whenever we find our attention has slipped away from ourselves towards anyone else, towards anything else, who is it who is aware of it? I am. So we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves. How to overcome this problem of Vishaya Vasanas constantly dragging our mind outwards? Bhagavan has said the only way is patient and persistent practice. No matter how many times our attention is distracted away from ourselves, what we have to do is to bring it back to ourselves. And then it'll again be distracted, and then again we bring it back. It is only by this patient and persistent practice that we can gradually weaken the Vishaya Vasanas. And to the extent the Vishaya Vasanas are weakened, to that extent we have the strength to cling firmly to self-attentiveness. So it's just a matter of persevering in the practice, where there's no shortcut. This is the direct path. So there's no shorter road than the direct road. The direct road is what is our aim? Our aim is to see ourselves, to see what we actually are. In other words, to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. So in order to see ourselves, we have to look at ourselves. Very simple. So why we don't see ourselves here and now? Because we still have strong Vishaya Vasanas, we are unwilling to let go of other things. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, which I said earlier, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. So in order to go deep in this practice of self-investigation, we need to be willing to let go of all other things. Because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas, we are not yet willing to let go of everything else. So we have to continue trying but as we continue trying, every time we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we are thereby weakening our Vishaya Vasanas. So we just have to persevere in this practice. To put it another way, each moment of our life, we have a simple choice. Do we attend to ourselves or do we attend to other things? Till now, we have spent life after life after life attending to things other than ourselves. So now we have come to Bhagavan's path and we have learned that what we need to attend to is ourselves. So because of this having been constantly attending to other things, why do we attend to other things? Because we believe happiness lies outside. We believe that if I get this or if I get that, I will be happy. So because we wrongly believe that happiness lies outside us, our attention is constantly going out. So we need to slowly use our discrimination. But happiness doesn't lie outside, it lies only within. And there's nothing outside worth thinking of. Whatever is happening outside, it's all going on according to the divine plan. It's all, as Bhagavan, as it had been destined to happen, things are going to happen, whether we attend to them or not. So let everything take its course. Our only concern should be to attend to ourselves. So we have to slowly cultivate this liking to be self-attentive. So at each moment, we can either attend to other things or we can attend to ourselves. Every moment we attend to ourselves, we are thereby weakening our Vishaya vasanas. So the more we attend to ourselves, the more rapidly our vasanas will be weakened. So we just have to persevere in this practice. That is all there is to it. I don't know if you're there, Haran, but if you are, I hope I've answered your question adequately. The next person who has the hand raised is Kiran. Do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. So the question, it's basically a related question. I'm not sure if you've answered this in the past because I've just joined. As we know, the main important thing is to have patience and perseverance when you're doing this practice. But you can only have that patience and perseverance when you actually love what you're doing, basically.
Yeah.
So I know it might be a repeated question, but how to actually develop this love, basically? Sometimes it gets very, I don't know how to express it, but sometimes it gets very tough.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have only one answer. Whatever question you ask, I will say the same thing. The only way to develop that love is by patient and persistent practice, because the love you talk about is what is called bhakti. The weakening of our Vishaya vasanas is what is called vairagya. These two are inseparable. To the extent that we develop love to know ourselves, to that extent our vasanas will be weakened. And to the extent that our vasanas are weakened, we will develop love to attend to ourselves. So the weakening of our vasanas and the strengthening of our love to be self-attentive are one and the same thing. Most of us have strong Vishaya vasanas. Let's be honest with ourselves. We have more taste, more liking to attend to other things than to attend to ourselves. So it's an uphill struggle. We have to, but however difficult it may be, there is nothing else worth doing in this life. Whatever else we may achieve, we may have a successful career, we may have a loving family, so many things may be there. But one day we're going to have to say goodbye to all these things, because we know this. All these things can last only as long as this body lasts. When the body goes, all these other things will go. Nothing that we can achieve in life is of any lasting benefit, except this the bhakti and vairagya that we develop by means of a persistent practice of self-investigation and self-surrender. So our love may be very inadequate now, but let us utilize the little. If we had no love for this, we wouldn't be here talking about this subject. The very fact that Bhagavan has drawn us to his path means he's already sown the seed of love in our heart. So we just have to take care of that seed. We have to nurture that seed. Bhagavan is, of course, doing so for us, but he does so through us. Through our efforts to attend to ourselves, Bhagavan's grace is working. So by attending to ourselves, we are yielding ourselves to his grace. So let us, when we attend to ourselves, to the extent that we attend to ourselves, ego is thereby subsiding. To the extent that ego subsides, grace can flow freely. So let us stop obstructing his grace by allowing our attention to go outwards. Let us give his grace a free passage by turning our attention within. So this is the only way. There is no other way. If there was an easier or better way, Bhagavan would surely have shown us. But there is no easier or better way. Why? Logically, what is our aim? The problem we face now is we are aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So this is what is called ignorance or vidya, ajnana, or whatever. In order to get rid of this ignorance, in order to get rid of avidya, we need vidya. What is vidya? Nothing but being aware of ourselves as we actually are. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, in other words, in order to see what we are, we need to look at ourselves. It's as simple as that. So there cannot be any way easier or simpler or more effective. Moreover, during this process of self-investigation, if we had sufficient bhakti and vairagya, we would be able to turn within and be aware of ourselves as we actually are here and now. We're not able to be because of our lack of bhakti and vairagya, because of the strength, in other words, because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasana. We are not able to, we are not yet able to surrender ourselves completely by turning within sufficiently. So the direct way to weaken our Vishaya Vasanas is not to allow ourselves to be swayed by them. And in order to stop being swayed by them, we need to turn within. So long as we allow our mind to go outwards, to a greater or lesser extent, we're being swayed by our Vishaya Vasanas. So in order to deny those Vishaya Vasanas, we need to turn our attention within. So logically, this is the only way to turn, I mean, the only means by which we can weaken our Vishaya Vasanas and eventually know ourselves as we actually are. So we just have to persevere. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, Michael, that does. So the partial reason why I asked this is sometimes, you have these strong vasanas that you mentioned, and you feel like, how are you, a person who has such strong vasanas, has come to Bhagavan in the first place? And I'll tell you a simple example. I'm actually in Tiruvannamalai at the moment. I came for the Deepam festival, and because of the pandemic, they are not allowing anyone in the ashram. But for some reason, I went and I stood at the gate, and there's this person, Srinivas Murthy. I'm sure you know him, but he asked me to come in, and I went. I sat in the meditation hall. Literally, I was alone with Bhagavan for 2 hours. I don't know, because I know how what an idiot I am, and Bhagavan has allowed me to spend actually 2 hours, that too completely alone. No one else was in the meditation hall. I and Bhagavan. He's showing his love, but I'm not able to do from my end, my part. That's sometimes I don't know how to express it, but sometimes I feel he's doing everything that he can, but we don't know how to increase the love on our end. I'm sure what you explained now makes sense, but
don't worry. He is a master of tricks. He will find some way or other. However strong our ego and its Vishaya Vasanas may be, Bhagavan is infinitely stronger. So he has his own way of working from within us. Sometimes just recognizing our lack of love, our lack of vairagya, is itself a way of bringing about the subsidence of ego. When when you said you weren't here earlier, so you may not, but I was talking about the story of Brahma and Vishnu searching for the top and bottom of the column of fire. When Vishnu was burrowing down, the more he was able to recognize his own hopelessness, that he would never be able to recognize find the bottom of the column of fire, he became more and more humble. And as he became more and more humble, he was more and more willing to surrender himself. So this is all part of the process. It may seem to us that we're not making any progress, but we're just obstructing Bhagavan's grace. But Bhagavan's grace is doing its work in spite of us. So all we need to do is to yield to him. Even if we don't yield to him, if we yield to him, things will go quicker and smoother. But even if we don't yield to him, he will still find his way of working. So just let us trust him and try our best. Even little by little, at least for a few seconds here and a few seconds there, we can be self-attentive. That is sufficient. That is a start. If we, as Sadhguru used to, you may have heard, but I can tell what a nice analogy that Sadhguru used to say about the camel and the tent. A poor Arab trader was, his life was to travel through the desert, carrying his merchandise from one town to another. And that's how he bought things in one place and sold them in another place at a slight profit. That was his livelihood. So in the deserts, it'll be scorching hot in the daytime, and at night it becomes very cold. So every night he would tie his camel to a peg, and he would decided he would set up his little tent, and he would get in the tent and sleep. One night it was particularly cold, and after he'd been sleeping for an hour or two, he woke up and he found that the camel had put its nose in the tent. I mean, he thought to himself, yes, poor creature, it's been carrying me in the hot sun all day, and it must be feeling so cold outside, so let it at least have its nose inside. So thinking, he fell back to sleep, and an hour or two later he woke up and he found the whole head was inside. And each time he woke up during the night, he found more of the camel was inside. And finally, when he woke up in the morning, the camel had occupied the whole tent and he was outside. Sadhguru used to tell this story and said, likewise it is with self-attentiveness. A little bit of, let the nose enter, let at least a little bit of self-attentiveness take place in our life. The more we allow it, the more it will take over our life. And eventually, only self-attentiveness will remain and we will be out of the picture.
That's very clear, Michael. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.
So, Ash, before I answer your question, I'll answer one more question that I've been asked by email. Srinivas has asked, in the path of self-inquiry, how the prayer and worship helps? As this is an easy first step for many, what is your view? I think I answered this question earlier, but I'll say it again. That is, our aim is to turn within. That is what Bhagavan has taught us. But because of the strength of our Vishaya vasanas, our mind keeps on coming outwards. And sometimes in this struggle to turn within, we feel however much we're trying, we keep on failing. It doesn't actually matter our failing, because so long as we're trying, that's what's important. But still, sometimes we feel helpless. We feel that our mind is being tossed hither and thither by our vasanas. Bhagavan has written a very appropriate verse for that in Akṣaramaṇamālai. Nihamal nilamal markatrale kalam ahamal kartarul Aruṇācala. That is, protect me and be my helmsman, so that I may not be like a ship tossing in a great storm. The storm he refers to is the storm of our vasanas. So Bhagavan has given a prayer suitable for every situation. So prayer can, can be a very great support to us in this path. What is prayer? True prayer is not, I mean, reciting Bhagavan's verses is good, but true prayer is when the heart calls out, just like we can see in the prayers of Akṣaramaṇamālai and other hymns in the Stuti Panchakam. We can see how Bhagavan's heart is crying out for that, for the help required. Of course, Bhagavan doesn't need any help. Bhagavan doesn't need to pray. Through those verses, he's teaching us how to pray. So prayer has a role to play. And you ask about prayer and worship. The thing with worship and also with prayer, many people worship God. They go to temples or mosque or churches or synagogues or whatever. What do they go there for? When they're praying to God, they're going with all their worldly problems, and they're praying to God for to pass their exam, or to get married, or to get a promotion in their job, or for this or that. That in most people's bhakti is not bhakti. It's not pure bhakti, it's kamya bhakti. That is, they are not devoted to God, they're devoted to the things that they think they can get from God. So they worship God or pray to God for the fulfillment of their desires. That is a certain stage of the spiritual, of the path of spiritual development, the journey we're all on. But as our mind matures, we come to understand that God is far greater than anything we may ask of him. There's Sadhom has sung a song in Tamil, Kodu Tavam Perida, Aladinda Kodu Poru Perida. Which is greater, the giver or the gifts, or the giver of these, or the things that are given? So obviously the giver is greater than the things given. So at a certain stage, we begin to pray to God, not for anything that we think we can gain from God, but for God himself, that is, for the love of God. We recognize how petty it is, how mean it is for me to be constantly asking God for this or that. When God is so gracious to me, so loving to me, why? And he surely knows what I need. So why should I be asking him for this or that? Let me, instead of asking for this or that, let me just surrender myself to him. Let me say, whatever is good for me, you do that. You know what is best. Whatever you wish for me is what I wish for myself. So as Bhagavan says in Aruṇācala Padigam verse 2, Ninishtam Anishtam, your will is my will. That is happiness for me. So slowly the kamya bhakti matures into nishkamya bhakti. So then, though the nishkamya bhakta may be doing the same acts of worship as the kamya bhakta, the love with which he or she is doing it is completely different. So if we pray to God or worship God, we should pray and worship not for any material thing. We should pray for nothing but for the love to surrender ourselves completely. That is, so if we want to know for what we should pray and how we should pray, Bhagavan has given us a prayer manual in the form of Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. Everything that we should pray for, he has prayed for there. That is praying for the, ultimately it all amounts to praying for the annihilation of ego. We shouldn't ask God for anything else, because Bhagavan has explained to us the root of all, whatever problems we may face in life, the root of all those problems is ego. That is its own. In sleep, we have no problems. Only in waking and dream, we face problems. We face problems because we have risen as ego, identified ourselves with the body, and therefore seeing all this multiplicity full of so many problems and dangers and everything. So all these things, all these problems arise only because we've risen as ego. So since the root of all our problems is ego, if we want to be free of all our problems, the only way is to be free of ego. So we should whatever we pray for, it should be a prayer that is conducive to the destruction of ego. Either we pray directly for the destruction of ego, or we pray for the love that is required for the destruction of ego. There's another prayer of Sadhu Om. He's written a work called Ramana Sahasram, which is 1,000 verses praying for jnana. And in one of the verses, he says, Antamukhamandri Varo. Okay, I won't say the verse because I've been asked not to say too much time. Basically, the meaning of that verse is, though I pray for 1,000 boons, please do not fulfill any of my prayers except those prayers which will help me to be antamukha, to turn within. So that is what we should pray for, only for the love to turn within and thereby surrender this ego completely. If we are praying for that, that is a great support to us in the path of self-inquiry. As Bhagavan often said, bhakti is the mother of jnana. That is, it is only by love, by bhakti and vairagya, by the love to know ourselves and the freedom from desire for other things, but we can know ourselves. So without bhakti, we cannot succeed in this path. So bhakti is all important. So, and prayer and worship are all part of, they're preliminary stages of the path of bhakti, but the highest bhakti is to surrender ourselves. And in order to surrender ourselves, we need to investigate ourselves. That is, we need to turn our attention within. So I hope that answers your question adequately, Pratima. I will now, Ash, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Michael, for taking my question. Attention is key on the path and also grace, without which we cannot reach the goal. I think Sadhu Om said that attention is grace.
Yes.
We should guard attention at all times, so when we are aware our attention is turning outward, we need to immediately turn it back to ourselves, the I am sense, which is existence consciousness. Can you please talk a bit about the relationship between attention and grace?
Right. Okay. We can see this in our, even with, that is the effect of attention, we can see even without taking to this path of self-attention. That is, there are people in life, if someone is thinking a lot about a thing, supposing someone, just for example, supposing someone desperately wants a promotion in their job, because if they get a promotion, they'll get better salary and everything. So they're constantly thinking about that promotion. The more they think about that promotion, the bigger it seems to be. It seems that thought of I want this promotion is occupying their whole life. So it's as if there's no greater goal in life than getting that promotion. So that is because why that thought of that promotion becomes so strong, because they're attending to that thought. There are other people suffer from phobias. People suffer from obsessions. There are people who have a particular phobia. The more they think of what they're afraid of, the more their fear increases, or the more they think about whatever they're obsessed about, the more the obsession grows. So we can see from this that things loom large in our life to the extent that we attend to them. So in this way, if we attend to anything other than ourselves, that thing becomes seemingly a very big thing. So attention has this power. So to the extent that we turn our attention towards ourselves, the more we attend to ourselves, the more the love to attend to ourselves will grow. So in this way, by turning our attention within, we are giving grace to that self-attentiveness, so to speak. By attending to other things, we're giving grace to those other things. So what do we want to give grace to? since happiness lies only within us, according to Bhagavan, what we want to strengthen is the love to attend to ourselves. So more we attend to ourselves, the more that love to attend to ourselves will increase. Because why? That's on the surface. I'm explaining that. A deeper way of explaining this is, what is grace? Grace is nothing but God's love for us. But who is God? God is nothing but our own real nature. God means, God or Guru is the same. We can say Bhagavan, because for us Bhagavan is God and Guru and everything. So grace is nothing but the love that Bhagavan has for us. But what is Bhagavan? Bhagavan is our own real nature. He is that which is always shining in our heart as eye. So grace is the love that we, as we actually are, have for ourselves as we actually are. So the grace is that which draws our mind back within to merge and to surrender ourselves and thereby merge back into our source. However, if we allow our mind, if we to the extent that we have desire for other things, and thereby allow our mind to go out towards those other things, the grace which we should be directing back within in order to merge in our source, we are allowing that to go outwards. So by attending to it, attention is the chit aspect. Grace or love is the priya or ananda aspect. Chit and ananda or priya are one and the same. Priya means love, but that is pure awareness and pure love are one and the same thing. That is, our real nature is pure awareness and pure love. So by attending to anything, that is, where does our attention go? Our attention goes to those things we like, those things we desire. It also sometimes goes to those things we dislike, but that is because we desire to be free of those things. So if I've got something that is troubling me, I'm often thinking about it. But why I'm thinking about it, not because I want to think about it, because I want to get rid of it. So whatever we attend to, we are gracing that thing. So let us attend only to ourselves, to direct this power of attention, power of grace, back towards its own source, which is ourself. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, Michael, thank you. The thing is, we've been listening to grace and the importance of attention, but sometimes, it doesn't get deep inside of you, the message. So yesterday I was listening to one of your videos. I think it was on Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, and for some reason at that time it just struck me that is all there is, because every day we try to tell ourselves, we are going to turn inward, we'll try to take attention from outside and turn inside, and then you get so absorbed in things that you even forget that your attention has turned outward. But when I heard this yesterday, it rung a bell that it's a very easy thing to do. Every moment you just ask yourself, where is your attention at this moment? And you will know whether it's in or whether it's out. And at the same time, you know that it's out, turn your attention back in. So I think it's an effective way of gauging where your attention is. So that really helped me. And the fact that by giving more attention to something, your grace also is directed in that area. So it helps with the progress on the path.
Yes. That is, though self-attentiveness seems to be a very simple thing, it is the most powerful of all things. It is the Brahmastra, the supreme weapon that Bhagavan has given us. The more we attend to ourselves, the more that grace is shining forth, and eventually that will swallow us completely. This whole universe has been created by our allowing our attention to go away from ourselves. By returning our attention to ourselves, everything will be dissolved, will be swallowed by grace. So as Bhagavan said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. Another way of explaining this is if we equate grace with attention, it is attention, allowing our attention to go outward that has begun all this show, this dream. By turning our attention back within, we can bring this dream to an end. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Michael. Just wanted to also ask that when one finds that, as one progresses along, that their, interest in other things of the world is decreasing, the motivation to do things is decreasing, can that be said that that is vairagya?
Perhaps, but sometimes the true sign of vairagya is the love to turn within. Sometimes when we engage in worldly activities, we face so many problems. So we may just feel an aversion to worldly activities without actually having that love to turn within. So the love to turn within is the important thing. Sometimes just out of laziness, I'm fed up with always working, and so we want to give up working or whatever. That is not true vairagya. True vairagya is when we have a love to turn within.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
The next question I have is a long question asked by Pratima. Pratima, are you here? Do you want to ask the question? It's better if you can ask it rather than me reading it, but if you're not here, I'll read it. Okay. Pratima's question, as I say, it's a very long one. It's basically, it's the age-old question about destiny and free will, which is a subject of, it's a very important subject because unfortunately it's a subject that many people are confused about. So what he says is, I have come across various explanations on destiny and free will, and I'm confused to what extent our lives are decided by our expectations and hard work. I request Michael to please be frank and answer these questions for me. I'm sorry for a long list of questions, and since the subject is sensitive, okay. So the first question he asks is, it is said that our mind is like the moon, which has no light of its own and operates by the power of God or the self, and not an atom can move except by his will. Taking both into consideration, it is not even the agamya karma, or is not even the agamya karma decided by God, and what we call free will is actually the will of God. No, that is not the case. That is, though the mind has no light of its own, the mind operates only by the light, that is, the original light is the pure awareness I am. The mind is able to know things, know both itself and other things, because that light of pure awareness is shining in its heart. But the light by which it knows things other than itself is not that original light, but only a reflection of that light, so to speak. Just like the moon has no light of its own, but it reflects the sunlight. The mind has no light of its own, but it reflects the original light of pure light, the light of pure awareness. So the light by which we know other things is what is called chittabhasa. Abhasa has two meanings. The basic meaning of abhasa is semblance. It's a likeness, or something that seems to be something else. A derived meaning of abhasa is reflection, because when we look in a mirror and see our reflection, what are we seeing? We're seeing a likeness of ourselves, a semblance of ourselves. It's not actually ourselves in the mirror, but it looks just like ourselves. So chittabhasa means a a semblance of awareness or a reflection of awareness. Both meanings, both ways of interpreting it are appropriate. So what is Chitta-bhasa? Chitta-bhasa is nothing but ego or mind. So ego or mind is not a real awareness, it's just a semblance of awareness. Why is it not real awareness? Because real awareness is just pure awareness, the awareness I am. As ego, we are aware, we are always aware of I am, but we're also aware of other things. Since those other things are just an illusory appearance, they don't actually exist, being aware of anything other than ourselves is not real awareness, it's a false awareness. That's why it's called Chitta-bhasa, it's a semblance of awareness. But as this Chitta-bhasa, as this seeming awareness, we know things other than ourselves. And as the seeming awareness is ego. So as ego, we always identify ourselves with a body. And as Bhagavan said, the body we identify ourselves with, it's not just the physical form, it's a form of 5 sheaths. Those 5 sheaths are the physical form of the body, the life that animates it, the mind, that means the grosser functions of the mind, the intellect, and the will. The will is the collection of all our Vishaya vasanas, all our vasanas, not only Vishaya vasanas, because there's also Sat vasana. But so the collection of all our vasanas is our will. For most of us, most of our vasanas are Vishaya vasanas, that is inclination to be aware of things other than ourselves. Because we have inclination to be aware of things other than ourselves, we want to experience things that we consider pleasure and to avoid experiencing things that we consider unpleasant. Everything that happens, everything that we are to experience, it is decided by the will of God. That is, the will of God has decided what our prarabdha, what our destiny should be. It is selected from the fruits of our past actions, certain fruit to experience in this lifetime. That cannot be changed. However much we may want to change it, we cannot change it. However, though we cannot change what is to happen, and we cannot make anything happen that is not to happen, that is not destined to happen, we are free to want to experience what is not destined to happen and to want to avoid what is destined to happen. So that freedom to want this, to want anything, that is the freedom of will. That is what in Sanskrit is called Ichcha Shakti, the freedom of will. In addition to freedom of will, we also have what is called Kriya Shakti, the freedom of action. That is, we are free not only to want to experience what is not destined to happen and to want to avoid what is destined to happen, we are also free to try to experience what is not destined to happen and to try to avoid what is destined to happen. So the freedom to want is the Ichcha Shakti, and the freedom to do is the Kriya Shakti, the freedom of action. These two, actually, in practice, these two are inseparable. That is, our actions wouldn't be free unless we were free to want what we want. So freedom of will is the basis on which freedom of action exists. Without freedom of will, there would be no freedom of action. Because the freedom of action implies the freedom to do what we want. So if what we want wasn't free, then the actions wouldn't be free. So Bhagavan generally talked about these two freedoms as one. He called it Ichcha Kriya Swatantra. That is the freedom of will and action. Or in other words, the freedom to want what we want and to do what we want. However, though we have this freedom, we cannot change what is destined to happen. So we are free to want to change what is destined to happen, but we are not free to do so. So we are free to want and we are free to try, but we're not free to actually change anything, because what is going to happen, that alone will happen. Bhagavan emphasized this very, very strongly. We cannot change what is destined to happen, even to an iota. Why he emphasized this so much? Do you mind turning off your mic? Yeah. We cannot change this an iota. Why he says that is, so long as we think we can change things, we will continue wanting to change them and trying to change them. When we understand what is destined to happen, that alone is going to happen. We cannot add an iota to the pleasures we are to experience, or to avoid an iota of the sufferings we are to experience. Once we understand that will help us to curb our liking to experience what is not destined and to avoid what is destined. So what Bhagavan taught us about the operation, about the law of karma, that is how the three karmas work, is a very great aid to us in this practice. That is, whatever actions we do driven by our will are called agamya. Agamya can never bear fruit in this life. Whatever the fruit of agamya gets stored in sanchita, and it may at some point in future, when God sees fit, be selected to form part of a prarabdha of a future life. But we cannot experience it in this life, because what we are to experience in this life has already been charted out. We cannot change it. We can want to change it, we can try to change it, but we cannot change it. So when we understand this, we should refrain from doing agamya. So how to refrain from doing agamya? Then the question arises, how to know which actions are agamya and which actions are prarabdha? Because certain actions we have to do in order to experience what we are destined. So the actions of our mind, speech, and body are driven by two forces, by prarabdha, or by that is, actually Bhagavan says it is God or Guru, Adakanavan, as he says in his note to his mother, who makes us act according to prarabdha. So whatever actions are necessary for us to do in order to experience both prarabdha, those actions will be made to do. But not all the actions we do are actions according to prarabdha. So there are two forces. There's our will and there's prarabdha. These two forces are driving our actions. Some actions we do may be driven by both of these. Supposing it's our destiny today to eat a nice, tasty meal. We also have a desire to eat that nice, tasty meal. So that eating of a nice, tasty meal is driven both by the prarabdha and by our will. So we cannot separate, we cannot distinguish which action, to what extent each action is driven by destiny and to what extent it's driven by our will. Both of these are working side by side, and we need not distinguish. In order to avoid doing agamya, what is it that drives us to do agamya? It's our desires, our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, fears, and so on. So in order to avoid doing agamya, all we need to do is to curb our likes, dislikes, desires, and so on. In other words, we need to curb our vishaya vasanas, the vasanas that draw our mind outwards towards other things. If we curb those, we thereby refrain from doing agamya. So in order to curb our vishaya vasanas, as Bhagavan taught us, the most effective way is to turn our attention within. So to the extent that we turn our attention within, we are thereby curbing our desires, and thereby we are avoiding doing agamya. When our attention is turned within, whatever actions of mind, speech, and body are necessary, according to prarabdha, body and mind will continue, body, speech, and mind will continue doing those actions, but our attention will be turned within. So the key, this is why Bhagavan, in some books it's recorded, Bhagavan said the only freedom you have is to turn within. What he meant is the only freedom you have to avoid, to extricate yourself from this this law of karma, this agamya and sanchitra and prarabdha, this constant cycle of doing actions by our will, thereby accumulating fruit, and then later experiencing those fruit as our destiny. The only way to get ourselves out of this is by turning our mind within. Does that adequately answer? No, okay. I hope that adequately answers that part of the question. Then the second part of the question is, if life operates according to prarabdha, and if a person is destined to be murdered or commit suicide, then it will definitely take place. So the murderer is also preordained, and he cannot avoid the crime as it is not in his hands. So are the various crimes and injustices which take place, like theft, harassment, fraud, etc. So are the various crimes. For example, a thief cannot avoid stealing if he is destined to steal. And if he is not destined to be successful in robbery, he cannot steal however much he tries to do it. So what he gets by stealing is according to his prarabdha, which has already been predetermined and cannot be changed. Is my observation right on events mentioned above? Yes, whatever. We can go on analyzing these things and getting ourselves into a confusion. Let's keep things simple. Prarabdha is whatever we are to experience is prarabdha. In order for us to experience that prarabdha, we will be made to do certain actions, because without doing certain actions, we cannot we cannot do. So some of our actions are driven by destiny. But it's not just that action A is driven by destiny, action B is driven by will. Many of our actions are driven by both destiny and will. For example, it may be my destiny to be a thief and to steal, but I also have a desire to steal because I want to become rich. So though it is my destiny to steal, I'm still doing agamya when I steal because I'm doing it with desire. If I could steal without any desire, I mean, in practice, how many thieves are stealing without any desire for what they steal? So destiny and free will are so intimately interconnected in our life, we cannot distinguish one from another, and it is futile to try. All we need to know is that when we allow our attention to go, our mind to go outwards, to a greater or lesser extent, it's going to wander under the sway of its vasanas, as Bhagavan says. When we allow our mind outwards, we can, to some extent, but that is, vasanas are dragging our attention in so many different directions. That is, we have so many likes and dislikes, desires and attachments. Often our desires are in conflict with one another. We want one thing and we want another thing, but the two are incompatible. So we have to choose between this desire and that desire. So it is up to us. When we are allowing our mind to wander under the sway of vasanas, we still have control over whether we allow ourselves to be swayed by this vasana or that vasana. So we still have control, but so when we are allowing our mind outwards, we can reduce the extent to which it is swayed by its vasanas, but we cannot completely avoid being swayed by vasanas so long as we allow our mind outwards, because allowing the mind outwards is itself allowing ourselves to be swayed by vasanas. So the most effective way to avoid allowing ourselves to be swayed by vasanas is to turn our attention within. That is what we need to do. The more we turn our attention within, the more we are thereby curbing our vasanas, and the more we are thereby refraining from acting according to our vasanas. So we are thereby avoiding doing agamya. We are avoiding acting according to our will. So we need not, as I say, we need not try and distinguish to what extent is this action driven by destiny, to what extent is it driven by will. This is all an atma-vichara. It's all thinking about things other than ourselves. What we need to do is to turn our attention within, thereby curb curb the vasanas, thereby avoid allowing ourselves to be swayed by vasanas. And when we avoid being swayed by vasanas, we avoid doing any agamya. Very simple. So Bhagavan's path is the solution to all these things. The next question Pratima asks is having negative thoughts according to destiny? Again, the answer is the same. We cannot say to what extent any action of mind, speech, or body is driven by prarabdha, or to what extent it's driven by agamya. So let us not try. That is, if we have negative thoughts, any thoughts we have those thoughts because we attend to them. If we want to be free of negative thoughts, the most effective way to avoid being free of negative thought is to attend to ourselves. So we need to keep in mind this central point. The solution to all these problems, the answer to all these questions, is to attend to ourselves. And then he goes on to say, I would like to mention that I'm not using destiny as an excuse to evil intentions or deeds, but just trying to understand prarabdha better. Well, regarding this law of karma and this prarabdha and agamya and so on, we cannot understand it in detail because the details are known only to God or Guru. All we need to understand is the general principles. The general principle is whatever we are to experience is according to prarabdha, cannot be changed. Whatever we do, driven by our own will, that is by our own likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments, is agamya. These two are going on side by side in our life. We cannot distinguish one from the other, but what we need to do is to turn our attention back within. That's all that matters. By turning our attention back within, we are thereby surrendering ourselves and not allowing ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas. Then it goes on to say, there is also another view that destiny is changed by God for those who have totally surrendered. Yes, this is a very common view, but it is... if we are totally surrendered, why should we want God to change our destiny? So long as we want God to change our destiny, we have not surrendered. When we have surrendered, it doesn't matter whether God changes our destiny or not, because we are surrendered, we're indifferent to whatever happens. But generally speaking, God does not change destiny. Why? Because God has ordained the destiny. Whatever destiny God has ordained for us is the best possible destiny for us. So he has tailor-made our destiny to suit us. So he knows to what extent we're going to surrender and everything. So it's all the destiny. When he has, why should he change what he's already decided? There may be, in some exceptional cases, he may change it, but how are we to know whether he's changed it or not? Because all we know is what happens. When something has happened, we know that was our destiny. What is our destiny the next minute? We don't know because it hasn't happened yet. When it happens, we will know. So all this idea about God changing destiny if we surrender, firstly, if we surrender, if we really wanted to surrender, we wouldn't be bothering about our destiny being changed. So long as we want God to change our destiny, we haven't surrendered. And then he goes on, in the life of Bhagavan Ramana, there are some instances quoted by his disciples that he changed the destiny of some of his devotees. How can anyone know this? People may say, oh, I prayed to Bhagavan and he changed my destiny. How do we know that he's changed our destiny? Because what we experience is our destiny. So they know, even if Bhagavan ever did change our destiny for any reason, we couldn't know it because we know it only when it happens. And when it happens, that's our destiny. So all this is all meaningless talk. It is also said that Ramana prayed to Aruṇācala to cure his mother of typhoid fever and she recovered. Bhagavan has said that for the Jnani, all the three karmas are destroyed. However, so long as we take the Jnani to be a person, a body, for that body there is a prarabdha. So whatever actions were Bhagavan's body did was according to prarabdha, or in other words, to put it more simply, it was according to God's will. So if Bhagavan prayed for his mother to cure his mother, he didn't do so of his own volition because he had no will of his own. Like earlier Manek referred to what Bhagavan said about his coming down from Skandashram to the place where later Ramanashram grew up, where his mother Samadhi was. Bhagavan said it wasn't of my volition, it was the divine will. That applies to all Bhagavan's actions. So it is because Bhagavan had no will of his own, because the individual will is ego's will. When ego is destroyed, its will is destroyed along with it. So Bhagavan had no likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, anything. So when he prayed for his mother, for the cure of his mother, it is according to divine will that he prayed. Moreover, it's important to remember that though on the surface, in those verses, he seems to be praying for his mother's recovery from a physical fever, those verses can be interpreted in two ways. Fever can mean the fever of the body or the fever of samsara. So he was praying not only for the recovery of his mother's body, but also for her salvation. That had a double meaning there. But as I say, Bhagavan didn't do that or anything else of his own volition. Everything was according to the divine will, because he had no will of his own. Because when ego is destroyed, that is complete surrender, then there's no one to want anything. So Bhagavan had no likes, dislikes, desires, or anything. At one point it is mentioned that Ramana Maharshi said events of life is preordained, and in other place it is said he changed the destiny of his devotees who came to him for relief. Bhagavan said everything is preordained, that what everything means in this context means everything that we are to experience is preordained. It is devotees who say he changed people. For example, we can say, because Bhagavan prayed to Aruṇācala, so his mother was cured from that fever. But how do we know? His praying to Aruṇācala is also a part of her prarabdha, and her recovering from a fever is also a part of her prarabdha. So why should we interpret it that he has changed anything? It was her. She was an extremely blessed soul. I mean, what can be a greater blessing than to be the mother of Bhagavan, to carry Bhagavan in her womb for 9 months and breastfeed him and bring him up and everything. That is an extraordinary blessing. She, of all the souls in this world, she was chosen for that. So she was an extraordinary blessed soul. So as it was part of her prarabdha, but she should get that fever at some point in her life. It was also part of her prarabdha, but Bhagavan's body and mind should be prompted to compose those verses. It was also her prarabdha, but she should recover from that typhoid fever. So why should we interpret it that any prarabdha has been changed? When Bhagavan said prarabdha is fixed, it will not be changed, why should we say, oh, he has, in this case or in that case, he has changed prarabdha? That's just our interpretation. Bhagavan, when people press Bhagavan, can God change prarabdha? Bhagavan said, yes, of course, since God has ordained prarabdha, he can also change it. But why would God change it when he has ordained the prarabdha for a good reason? He knows what is the best prarabdha. Why should he change his decision at some point? It doesn't make any sense. So which of the statements above is correct? I think I've answered that. To what extent prarabdha and the grace of God operate in our life? Prarabdha is nothing but the grace of God. That is, it is grace that has allotted the prarabdha to us for our own, the prarabdha that has been allotted to us is the one that is most beneficial for us in our present spiritual journey. So it's grace, as Bhagavan often said, whether you call it prarabdha or you call it the will of God, it's the same thing. The will of God operates through our prarabdha, you can say. So, or the grace of God operates through our prarabdha. Not only through our prarabdha, but that's one of the ways in which it operates. Of course, grace is something far greater than prarabdha, but prarabdha is one of the tools used by grace, we can say. And then he goes on to say, some say that when agamya performed in the present birth is very strong, it bears fruit in this birth itself. Is it true? No, is the simple answer to that. That doesn't say it's not possible, because by God's grace, anything is possible. But it's not how the law of karma works. Generally speaking, whatever agamya we do in this life, that the fruit of that agamya will be added to the already vast store of fruit of past actions which we haven't yet experienced, namely sanchita, from which at some point in some future life, God may select that for us to experience. People are always, all these things, like people saying that agamya performed in the present life is very strong, it bears fruit in this birth, that goes against what Bhagavan said. What he wrote in his note to his mother is, what is not to happen will not happen, however much effort one makes. So whatever agamya we do is effort. So he said, whatever effort you make, what is not to happen will not happen. And what is to happen will not stop, however much obstruction you make, that is made. So that is the law of karma. So why people are always looking for exceptions? Whatever, what is our prarabdha, that is the will of Bhagavan. Let's accept it like that. And why should we want to change the will of Bhagavan? We want Bhagavan to change his will to suit our will. That is not surrender. If we're on the path to surrender, we should change our will to suit his will. That is, we should align we shouldn't want anything other than what he wants for us. In other words, as he says in Nāṉ Ār Padigam, Nishtam Anishtam, your will is my will. I don't want anything else other than what you want for me. And then he asks, I want to know in which stage of our lives is prarabdha charted out. Is it before the soul enters the womb, or is it at the time of the soul's entry into the womb, or is it at the time of birth, or the prarabdha of all our lives is decided together before we take a form? I don't think this is a question that need concern us. Charting out prarabdha is Bhagavan's work, not our work. Let him take care of his work. When he chooses to chart out our prarabdha, it's up to, I mean, he knows best. Generally, it is said, but it's all charted out at the moment the body comes into existence. Whether you take that as the birth of the body or the time the body is conceived in the womb, what does it matter? All these are unnecessary concerns. Prarabdha is God's lookout, Bhagavan's lookout. Let him take care of our prarabdha. Our job is to surrender ourselves to him by turning our mind within. That's all he's asked us to do. And then he goes on to ask, I read your blog. Oh, because when he wrote those questions, I suggested he read some articles in my blog. I read your blog and understood that the thoughts and actions controlled by destiny take place irrespective of what ego wants, and it has no control over what is destined. But under paragraph 29, that must have been a very long article where I wrote, which was in many sections. I think he's referring here to section 29, you have mentioned, no thought can rise unless we, the ego, are willing to attend to it. So we are ultimately responsible for everything we think. And another quotation of what I wrote, therefore prarabdha cannot make us think any thought unless we are willing to attend to it. So if we are not willing to attend to anything other than ourselves, prarabdha would be powerless to make us think, do, or experience anything. Even when we are still willing to even when we are still willing to attend to things other than ourselves, we are nevertheless free to choose what we attend to. So to the extent that we do not attend to other things, we will not only avoid doing agamya by mind, speech, or body, but will also avoid being affected by prarabdha. That is what I wrote. So he asked about this. Does it mean that we can control even the thoughts and actions controlled by prarabdha, by our will, by not attending to it? Does it mean a strong will or total indifference to what is going on around us change the outcome? What it means is, if the actions of mind, speech, and body that are destined to happen, that is the actions of mind, speech, and body that are necessary in order for our prarabdha to be experienced, they will happen whether we attend to them or not. But if we don't attend to anything, it cannot affect us. Things affect us only to the extent we attend to them. So if we turn our attention within, to the extent we turn our attention within, to that extent we are unaffected by prarabdha. But prarabdha means the prarabdha, but the prarabdha includes the actions of mind, speech, and body, but are necessary in order for us to experience prarabdha. So we can say those will go on, but we'll be unaffected by them. We won't be aware of those thoughts. That again here we are analyzing. We shouldn't analyze these things too closely. When I said no thought can rise unless we, the ego, are willing to attend to it, yes, that is the truth. But there, since the prarabdha is going to go on, if we're not attending to it, we can say the thought is arising, but when it's not arising in our awareness. It's all happening automatically according to the divine will. We can take it that way. But again, this is just analyzing too deeply. The thing is, to the extent that we attend to ourselves, to that extent, we avoid doing agamya, and we also avoid being affected by whatever prarabdha is unfolding. We ultimately, our aim is not just to attend to ourselves, but to attend to ourselves so keenly that we're aware of ourselves as we actually are. When we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego is thereby eradicated, and along with ego, all the three karmas are eradicated. So we cannot change prarabdha, but we can avoid being affected by prarabdha to the extent that we attend to ourselves and surrender ourselves. And if we attend to ourselves sufficiently, we will thereby destroy prarabdha altogether, along with the other two karmas. So I hope that is sufficient. Incidentally, in reply to the second thing he wrote, I said, no, we cannot change anything that is destined to happen, but to the extent that we attend to ourselves and thereby refrain from attending to whatever happens according to prarabdha, we will not be affected by it. And if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will eradicate ego and thereby destroy all the three karmas, as Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. I mean, I quoted that verse. If we are the doer of actions, we will experience the resulting fruit. When one knows oneself by investigating who is the doer of action, doership will depart and all the three karmas will slip off. This is the state of liberation, which is eternal. That is the doership. When he says doership will depart, the doership is nothing but ego. So long as we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as a body and mind. So we experience whatever actions are done by body, speech and mind as actions done by us. So in order to get rid of the doership, we need to get rid of the doer. By investigating, so that's why he says, when one knows oneself by investigating who is the doer of action, doership will depart. That means ego will depart and all the three karmas will slip off. So I've answered that. Parni, do you want to ask your question? You've got your hand raised.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Yeah. So my question was regarding a specific quote which I read last week from Bhagavan. And the quote is where Bhagavan says, just as the pearl diver ties a stone to his waist, sinks to the bottom of the sea, and there takes the pearl, so each one of us should be endowed with non-attachment, dive within oneself, and obtain the self-pearl. So when I was reading it, there are a few thoughts which came in mind in terms of what does Bhagavan mean, dive deeper within, because the whole context of this particular message which I felt was he's asking us to go deeper inside and dive deeper within oneself. But in the actual practice, when we do practice, when we pay attention to ourselves, when we attend to ourselves, there is a silence, and you are with your natural beingness, you are in the state of I amness with silence. So what do we mean here by diving deep within, like a pearl diver who dives into the bottom of the sea?
Okay. The context in which Bhagavan wrote this was in the 11th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, Who Am I? The paragraphs 10 and 11 are the paragraphs where he talks about Vishaya Vasanas. So we have to understand this analogy in the context of that. What he means, he defines what he means. I'll read the paragraph from the beginning. As long as Vishaya Vasanas exist within the mind, so long the investigation who am I is necessary. As and when thoughts appear, then and there it is necessary to annihilate them all by self-investigation in the very place from which they rise. That is, if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, as soon as a vasana arises in the form of a thought, it is thereby annihilated, because it can rise further only if we follow it. So if we're clinging to self-attentiveness, as he said in the previous paragraph, we need to cling tenaciously to Swarupa Dhyana. Swarupa Dhyana means self-attentiveness. If we do so, the vasana cannot draw our attention away from ourselves, and that is the means by which vasanas are gradually weakened. So the more we cling to self-attentiveness, the more vasanas will be weakened. So that is, in this sentence, he says, as and when thoughts appear, then and there it is necessary to annihilate them all by self-investigation in the very place from which they arise. The word he used for self-investigation is vicharana. Vicharana means attending to ourselves. So when we attend to ourselves, to the extent we attend to ourselves, to that extent we are not attending to other things. So he goes on to say, not attending to anything other than us, anything other, anya, that means, implies anything other than ourselves, is vairagya or nirasa. Vairagya means dispassion or detachment, nirasa means desirelessness. Vairagya and nirasa, two terms that mean the same thing. So not attending to anything other than ourselves, that is what he means by vairagya. Not leaving or letting go of oneself is jnana. In truth, these two are one. That is not letting go of ourselves and not attending to other things are one and the same thing. Not letting go of ourselves means clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, and not attending to other things, they're the same. The more we cling to self-attentiveness, the less we attend to anything else. So these two are the same. Then he gives this analogy, just as pearl divers, tying stones to their waist and sinking, pick up pearls that are found at the bottom of the ocean, so each one, sinking deep within oneself with vairagya, can obtain the pearl, the atma-mutu, the pearl of oneself, or the pearl that is oneself. That means one's real nature. So what does he mean here by sinking deep within or diving deep within? To the extent to which we attend to ourselves and thereby withdraw our attention from other things, to that extent we go deep within. We can we can understand it. How Sadhguru often used to explain it is in terms of trying to turn 180 degrees. Now we're facing outwards towards phenomena. We need to turn our attention 180 degrees back to face ourselves alone. When we are practicing self-investigation, so long as we're still practicing, we haven't yet turned 180 degrees. We may be turning 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. The number of the degrees to which we are turning, that is a metaphorical way of saying the extent to which we are turning our attention, we are fixing our attention on ourselves and thereby withdrawing it from other things. So if our attention is partly on ourselves and partly on other things, we are somewhere between 0 and 180 degrees. The more our attention is on ourselves, the closer we are to 180 degrees. The more our attention is on other things, the closer we are to 0 degrees. So the closer we are to 180 degrees, the deeper we are diving within. Within here means within our own pure awareness. So the more our attention is turned towards ourselves and thereby withdrawn from other things, the deeper within we are going. These are just ways of expressing it. It's not actually, I mean, there's no better way of saying it than going deep within. But what he means by going deep within is being so keenly self-attentive, but our attention is thereby withdrawn from other things. When we eventually manage to turn 180 degrees, then only are we aware of ourself alone and not to the slightest extent aware of anything else. When we're aware of ourself alone, then we are aware of ourselves as we actually are. So it's at that point where we manage to turn the full 180 degrees to face ourselves, but ego is destroyed. That is what in this analogy he calls getting the, taking the pearl, obtaining the pearl. Because we can obtain the pearl only when ego is destroyed. And why he uses this analogy of pearl divers, because in order for pearl divers to sink deep enough to get the pearls, they need to tie heavy stones to their waist. Those heavy stones are an analogy for the vairagya. That is, and without vairagya, we cannot, so long as we lack vairagya, we won't be turning, we will be turning maybe 10 degrees, 20 degrees. The more vairagya we have, that is, the more our mind is freed from its Vishaya vasanas, the more the Vishaya vasanas are weakened, the more they lose their hold over our mind, the more number of degrees we'll be able to turn. So the weaker the Vishaya vasanas, the heavier the stone of vairagya becomes. And eventually it will become heavy enough for us to sink to the bottom and get that pearl. I hope this answers that question adequately.
Yeah, just that one following question related to what you spoke in terms of the degrees. In the practice, so as you said, 180 degrees of complete turning will annihilate the ego. Yes. And what will happen is will be the complete pure awareness.
Yes.
So in practice, if I turn within myself and if I'm able to turn only 10 degrees or 15 degrees, so am I still attending to my own self or I'm still attending to myself with some adjunct? For example, if I turn within, not following any thoughts, okay, I'm not paying attention to the thoughts, I'm not paying attention to the breath, I'm paying attention to myself. But still there is a periphery in the outer periphery, there is certain amount of attention on the sensations of the body, not a tangible sensation, but still that attention is not completely within oneself. And when I know that there is some kind of subtle attention on the sensation, I ask, who is that paying attention to the sensation? Again, I go back to myself.
Yes.
But still, it would be 30% or 40% of turning within in terms of degree. So does that still mean that we are paying attention to ourselves? And how do I deepen it further from the 30 degree to like 60, 40 degree or 50 degree, because after that I'm not able to do anything, because once I ask that particular question, no, who is feeling that sensation, who is paying that subtle sensation, again I go back to myself, but after that there's nothing I can't do. So how do I strengthen or
there's nothing for us to do. As Bhagavan said, Jnana is not attained by doing anything, by just being as we actually are. How to be as we actually are? To the extent that we are self-attentive, to that extent we are just being. So if you are self-attentive, there's nothing else you need to do. When we are, as you say, when we are trying to attend to ourselves, there's still some on the periphery of our awareness. We are still we're still aware of other things to a certain extent. To the extent to which our attention is fixed keenly on ourselves, to that extent we are not aware of other things. So how to go deeper, you ask? Only by persistent practice. That is, the more we practice, the more what prevents us going deeper is our Vishaya vasanas. The more we practice, the more our Vishaya vasanas are weakened. To the extent that our Vishaya vasanas are weakened, the weakness of Vishaya vasanas is what is called vairagya. So that means the more we turn within, the weaker our Vishaya vasanas become, the stronger our vairagya becomes. That means the stone that we're tying to our waist is becoming progressively heavier. So we are sinking deeper and deeper. So it's the only, as I said before, the only answer to all questions is we have to persevere in the practice. But if we persevere in the practice, everything, I mean, the practice itself will solve all these problems. That is, the more we turn within, the more we practice, the weaker our Vishaya vasanas become. The weaker our Vishaya vasanas become, the more liking we will have to practice. And the more we practice, the weaker they'll become. So it's a snowballing process. The thing is, we have to start and to carry on, to persevere. That's all there is to it. It's extremely simple.
okay? Yeah. Thank you.
Now we have been silenced.
That's quite a feat to
silence me is a great feat. There's a big ego here bouncing around that needs silencing.
That was great, Michael. Very enlightening this time. Usually it's a bit above my head.
Well, it's all Bhagavan's doing, not my doing.
I think you had something to do with it yourself. Your egoless self had something to do with it.
To the extent I have anything to do with it, it won't be clear. To the extent it's clear, it's to the extent I have nothing to do with it.
Okay, we have to accept that.
Yeah.
With some reluctance.
The Guru is always within you, Ramana, and whether he you know, how to use a photo of him, and whether he gave any advice on this, because we all, I mean, I've had the classic one around for many years, you know. You know, of course, these are outer manifestations, aren't they?
Years ago, I read about something in Paul Brenton's book, and he said the photographs have the power.
Yeah, because even though one would think, wouldn't you, that some a fully realized being, their physical expression would carry something, you know, would even though in the photo it's just an arrangement of dark black and white areas, isn't it?
Yeah.
I believe someone
Oh, you're still here, my goodness.
Something to Bhagavan about a photo, and a photo of his, and Bhagavan said, what makes you think it's just a photo?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes.
That is a
Because-
typical Bhagavan's way of understating things.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
saying without saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because,
I
you
think
know,
that
if you
should
look
be
at any,
sufficient answer to your question.
yeah, thank you. Yes, that's really, really helpful, actually.
And Michael, your talk on Agamya karma and all that was very useful. But
Yeah, it's
I
something
still
that
get lost in
people
it.
seem to be very confused about, unfortunately.
Yeah, because every time we do something, there is an ego or I-ness saying, I'm doing this, yeah?
Yes.
The minute you involve the I, you can't do anything without your ego.
Yeah.
So does it become a karma which would carry fruit forward? Or is it a destined work that we are doing? We can't do anything without the I. So I always get lost in that.
Yes. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we have our likes and dislikes and so on. And our likes, dislikes, and so on influence our actions. So we can't say which to what extent any particular action is driven by prarabdha, to what extent it's driven by our will. In other words, to what extent it's a
Yeah.
But so long as we rise as ego, the will is operating, so we're inevitably doing our gamya. So we need not analyze which action is, because most actions, it's a mixture. So analyzing that is of no use. What we know is that as ego, we have likes and dislikes, and our likes and dislikes are what impel us to do agamya. So we need to surrender this ego by turning within. That's the only way to avoid doing agamya.
Yeah. Thank you. You summarized it well in the end.
It's a kind of one size fits all, doesn't it? There's just one answer to all questions.
That's the beauty about Bhagavan's teachings. If we understand the basic principles, then we can answer any question.
Yeah.
Because
and fortunately, the principles are so simple, even a dullard like me can understand it and answer. So that's why I say it's nothing to do with me. It's just Bhagavan that has made it so simple.
But although it's so simple, it's also infinite, isn't it? So it's an infinite resource. It's not like, oh, this simple thing, you know.
Yes.
So,
So
it's resourceful infinitely.
Yes. Bhagavan's teachings are very simple, but they're also immeasurably deep.
Baba Michael, what is your thought on it? Will Bhagavan not take care of us?
He will, but
Bhagavan is always taking care of us. But everything will happen as it's meant to happen.
Yeah.
So sometimes he takes care of us by prompting us to make wise decisions.
Okay. Baba Michael, I have a quick question, or a request, a question for you. Does Bhagavan change his face according to how we feel, according to our moods? Because when I feel a little sad, I see a kind of kindness in his eyes. When I'm happy, I see a happy face on Bhagavan's face. Is it hallucination, or it just happens like that? It's just a reflection of what you feel.
That's why Bhagavan said, what makes you think it's just a photo? I think the context in which he said that is someone, I can't remember the exact context, but it was something to the effect, someone was having some difficulty and they looked at Bhagavan's photo and they got some sort of answer from a photo or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but Bhagavan said, what makes you think it's just a photo? That is, Bhagavan is in everything, but he's especially in his photos. So it is, I think we all find that sometimes when we look at Bhagavan's photos, the expression subtly seems to suit the mood we are in. It seems to be the appropriate expression for our mood. The same picture, but it will seem different in different circumstances.
Michael.
Because when we look at Bhagavan's photo, we are quite literally looking at the face of God.
Yeah.
Michael, leading from there, I have got so many cards of Bhagavan from the ashram. Every year they would send the cards for Deepam, for Shivratri, hundreds of them now.
Yes.
Since the photos are so important to us,
yes,
we worship them in a way.
Yes.
What do we do with all those cards? I can't put them in the bin.
Yes. It is a problem nowadays because things can be mass produced in this way. I think there's no simple answer. I think we have to follow our heart.
But I don't think anyone would be interested.
That is the problem. Then it's difficult to know. I mean, I think we all have books and other things on Bhagavan, but what will happen to them when we go, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want other people who are left behind to put them in the bin because they don't know what to do.
Yes. But I think we just have to leave it to Bhagavan to take care of all those things. We can't care for everything. He knows what is best. So